Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Sandy Smith, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Navy is Lieutenant Jordan Roney. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. The live stream of this ceremony is made possible by the Returned and Services League of Australia and the RSL and Services Clubs Association. We welcome members who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by visitors to the memorial. If you are able, I now invite you to please stand and join in singing the national anthem.
Australians, oh, let us rejoice, for we are one and free. We've golden soil and wealth for toil. Our home is got by sea. Our land abounds in nature's gifts of beauty, rich and rare. In history's page, let every stage advance Australia fair. In joyful strains, then let us sing, advance Australia fair.
Visitors who are able, please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight we'll read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 103,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first we present a lament. Flowers of the forest, wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Sapper James Douglas Beazley. James Beazley was born in northern Western Australia on the 4th of April 1913, the son of Robert and Bertha Beazley. Having found work as a carpenter and joiner, Beazley married Gertrude Taylor in 1938. The couple lived in Boulder and a child, Pat, was eventually born to them. James Beazley enlisted in the Australian Imperial Force on the 13th of July 1940. He was drafted to the Naval Base at Claremont in Perth, and in October he was found absent without leave, forfeiting 2 days' pay as punishment. In November, Beazley was transferred to the 2nd 6th Field Park Company, part of the Royal Australian Engineers. The company was responsible for providing the engineering workshop and stores for the 8th Division. He was found absent without leave in late January 1941 and was fined and forfeited 4 days' pay as punishment. In April, he was granted pre-embarkation leave. Having bid farewell to friends and family, Sapper Beazley and his comrades in the 2nd 6th Field Park Company embarked from Fremantle in late May 1941 and arrived in Singapore in early June. Beazley continued to serve with his unit, as well as being detached to other Royal Australian Engineers units on a few occasions in January 1942. The assault against Singapore began with amphibious landings in early February. Despite heavy fighting, the defenders were unable to stem the Japanese advance. On the 15th of February, Singapore was surrendered. Beazley joined the 15,000 Australians who became prisoners of the Japanese. He was initially held in Selarang Barracks, the AIF camp at Changi. Then in early July, he embarked with B Force, a group of about 1,500 Australians which left Singapore aboard one of the notorious hell ships bound for Sandakan in North Borneo. Arriving in mid-July, the prisoners marched to Sandakan No. 1 prisoner of war camp, where they were told they would construct an airfield. Conditions and food supplies were reasonable at first, but deteriorated in mid-1943, partly because of the arrival of brutal Formosan guards. A small cage was built within the camp to punish prisoners for trivial offences. Some men were confined without being able to stand up and with little food for as long as a month. The situation worsened in 1944, with brutal beatings, torture, and shrinking food supplies. Prisoners suffered from malaria, beriberi, and tropical ulcers, and the numbers of sick grew. With a lack of healthy prisoners for work parties, guards pulled sick men from their beds. Bash gangs attacked prisoners in numbers for the slightest misdemeanour. If one prisoner was viewed as not working properly, any number of men in his group could be beaten. In 1945, the Japanese began to fear an Allied invasion of Borneo and started to move prisoners away from the coast to Ranau, a small village some 250 kilometres inland in the mountains. From the end of January, the first group of 455 prisoners, mostly Australians, began their journeys westward in groups of 50 men. All of them were already weak with beriberi and malnutrition, and most lacked boots. Further marches to Ranau occurred in May and June, leaving behind at Sandakan only those too weak to move. Only 6 of some 2,500 Australian and British prisoners interned at Sandakan in northeastern Borneo would survive. Among those left behind at Sandakan No. 2 was James Beazley, who reportedly died of disease there, most likely malaria, on the 7th of July 1945. He was 31 years old. Beazley was buried in slit trenches inside the No. 2 compound, but his remains could not be identified after the war. With no known grave, today he is one of over 2,000 Commonwealth casualties commemorated at the Labuan Memorial in Borneo. His name is listed on the Roll of Honour to my left among almost 40,000 Australians who died while serving in the Second World War. His photograph is displayed today beside the pool of reflection. This is one but many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Sapper James Douglas Beazley, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the Ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall not grow old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub at Gallipoli with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of our director, staff and volunteers, thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and for your continued support during the memorial's development project. We wish you all a very pleasant evening.